Welcome into It's Official, the weekly podcast where Jeff Siegel and Jeremy Plonk from First Bet and Express Bet, we take on 5 hot topics in racing each week. There's only one topic this week. It's the Preakness Stakes coming up at Pimlico on Saturday. Well, more than one topic because we've got great racing around it as well. But we're going to devote our 5 topics on the show this week around the middle jewel of the Triple Crown. To those of you in the first Preakness wager guide watching, thank you for that. And be sure to check out all the other handicappers, stats, information, and videos within the wager guide. If you're not in the wager guide and you want to check it out, be sure to access it. Go to first.com/bet or at news.first.com and you can check out the first Preakness wager guide. Free access to that with all kinds of information updated daily. In fact, today on Tuesday, as we record the podcast, the update today is Millie Ball now has her official picks in for Friday's Black Eyed Susan Stakes in her suggested wagers. So be sure to check out Millie's picks in that one. And Jeff Siegel and I will have our picks coming up tomorrow in the Preakness Wager Guide and all our wagering strategies. Eddie Olczyk will join us on Thursday in the Wager Guide for his final picks for Preakness number 149. Jeff Siegel, I've talked enough already. Let's get you into the program here, promotions aside and setting the table. Can't wait for this week for Preakness.
Yeah, the card's out for Saturday, a great wagering card with the undercard stakes races as well. So it's going to be a fun day. Maybe a chance of rain. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but very little chance that Muth won't be the favorite based on his form. You could say that why wouldn't they bet on the Derby horse, the Derby winner, Mystic Dan? I'm sure that there will be plenty of backers there. But Muth handled Mystic Dan when they met head-to-head, toe-to-toe in the Arkansas Derby, and was very convincing then. Has done nothing but train unbelievably well since for Bob Baffert, who I believe will be seeking, what is it, his 9th Preakness win now?
Yep.
So whatever it is, Muth is going to have a lot going for him. And I do believe he is clearly, based on all the factors that go into handicapping, he's going to be really hard to beat.
We are here in the second leg of the Triple Crown because 2 weeks ago at Churchill Downs, it was Mystic Dan pulling the upset. Let's set the stage for what we've got coming this weekend with a look back in Louisville.
It is wide open. Catching Freedom's going to come through toward the inside. They're off the turn. Mystic Dan cut the corner and grabbed the lead right at the top of the stretch. Sierra Leone and Forever Young are shoulder to shoulder with a furlong to go, but they've got 2 lengths to make up on Mystic Dan, who's begging for the wire. Forever Young and Sierra Leone keep on coming. Sierra Leone, Forever Young, and Mystic Dan. A wild finish. Here's the wire. Photo finish. 3 noses on the wire. Mystic Dan, Sierra Leone, and Forever Young in an international thriller.
We will follow that thriller with not a rematch, but with 1st and 4th place finishers from the Kentucky Derby, of course, and the new shooters involved. We have 3 Kentucky Derby finishers overall coming back for the Preakness Stakes this year in the field of 9. Let's get to our first of 5 topics. First up, the field and the morning line as established yesterday in a ceremony Monday night in Baltimore. Morning line maker Brian Naddle, buddy of ours here on the program. He is the morning line maker for the Maryland Jockey Club. You know him at Gulfstream Park as well as handicapper there. Brian's morning line, he has Muth as the 8-5 favorite from post position 4. Mystic Dan, the Derby winner, 5-2 second choice. Now, last year when we had the upset winner in the Derby Mage, he ended up going off 7-5 in the Preakness, but you go back to horses like I'll Have Another, who won the Derby at a price and weren't the actual post-time favorite in the Preakness Stakes. This could be the situation we're looking at this year, certainly with the new shooter and some extenuating circumstances with the new shooter in Muth, Jeff. That makes a logical 8-5 morning line favorite. Of course, he was not eligible to run in the Kentucky Derby due to Churchill Downs' ban of Bob Baffert. So this is not your traditional new shooter per se to the Preakness, but could be a follow-up to National Treasure for Baffert.
Might even be a blessing in disguise for Muth that he wasn't in the Derby, because now he's a fresh horse, didn't or wasn't subjected to a hard race and a quick turnaround. And I'm not sure at 1.25 miles Muth would have been all that comfortable anyway. Although we know he's good enough to beat the Derby winner because he already did that. So I think if that weren't the case, if that win, that head-to-head matchup in the Arkansas Derby didn't exist, you might see a much closer situation with the odds, but it's hard to get past Muth. You know, you may think, well, Muth is good. He's not great. He may not have to be great to win this race, but he's pretty good. I know that. and he also has a very favorable situation with the race flow. So I'd love to be able to rip apart the morning line. I can't find any fault with it. So congratulations to Brian or congratulations to me for agreeing with him. Either way you want to put it, I'm not sure, but it looks like a very solid, fair line, and I'm not sure there's anything out of line there.
Yeah, look, you've got co-third choices in here at 6-1 with Imagination and Catching Freedom. The name recognition of Catching Freedom through the Triple Crown and Brad Cox, that might be worth another point maybe on the board, and maybe he goes a bit lower. But Imagination's Frankie Dettori, and maybe he goes a bit lower. And you also have the whole possibility that Muth goes shorter than 8-5 in this particular spot, which then boosts everyone's prices up there. And you look at the top-end long shots in this race, and you say, look, there's nobody over 20-1. Last year, every horse in the 7-horse field was in single digits. And in the last 3 years of the Preakness Stakes, there has been one horse over 20-1 odds in the last 3 years. This is part of the effect we see after long shot winners in the Kentucky Derby. Everybody covers all their bases when it comes to the win pool and the Preakness. Remember, win pool odds are based on a lot of casual players. These are people who jump in and just bet in the win pool. And we saw that tremendous win pool in the Kentucky Derby this year. The real growth in the race is the win pool wagering, it seems. And the effect of a long shot winner like Mystic Dan winning the Kentucky Derby, that boomerang effect to the Preakness Stakes will be, there will not be a lot of top end long shots. So even though you think maybe Mugatu and Uncle Heavy are big time prices, and maybe in your mind you're saying these horses are 100-1 to win this race, they're not going to be 100-1 on the tote board the way the public has bet the Preakness in recent years, and as they usually do after a long shot winner in the Derby, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I always marvel at the prices of some of these no chances that I think should be 100-1 that are like 17-1 or something. I said, come on. You want to bet on that horse? See me first. How about that?
Right.
But I'm not so sure that Muth is going to go much slow. Maybe he will because of the Baffert factor and the win. But I don't know. I mean, I think he's good. I don't think he's great. I mean, I wouldn't take even money on him or anything like that. I think he'll probably win due to the circumstance. But I'm intrigued by the exactas and trifectas here as well. I think there may be some value in the wagering going that route.
The last time they matched up in Arkansas, Jeff's already alluded to you. It was Muth getting the victory with Mystic Dan coming in third. Just Steele second in that race, also back in this year's Preakness. Let's go back to the Arkansas Derby with Matt Dinnerman's call.
And there goes Muth to challenge Timberlake, and the race is on now. Muth on the outside, strides level. Timberlake back in second as Muth takes command. Muth and Juan Hernandez have a quarter mile more to get, and Hernandez gives them the cue to go, and Muth off the turn, still in front. Timberlake second, Jess Steele third, then Mystic Dan who tries to rally on. Furlong to go. It's Muth. Jess Steele running huge in second. Timberlake third. Muth with a 16th to go. He's opened up by 3. And it's Muth coming down the stretch in Hot Springs to win it. Muth, the son of Good Magic, wins the Arkansas Derby. Jess Steele second, Mystic Dan third. Timberlake flattens out to fourth.
Matt mentioned the son of Good Magic in that call. Good Magic last year in the Preakness Stakes, all he had was second place finisher Blazing Sevens and third place finisher Mage. Not bad performance from that son of Curlin. Of course, Curlin, the sire of Good Magic, and Curlin's such a great pedigree influence in races at Pimlico. I ran the stats. Curlin's win 27% of the time on the main track at Pimlico over the years, Jeff. And of course, he won the Preakness here in 2007. I know you love Curlin, so any influence with Curlin in the pedigree, I give a little extra shove to. So these couple grandsons of Curlin we have in this race, Tuscan Gold, of course, a grandson on the maternal side of Curlin, and then Muth, of course, with Good Magic as the sire. He's a grandson of Curlin as well. So a lot to like there amongst the horses coming out of the Arkansas Derby for sure.
No question. Curlin's pretty good other places too, by the way.
Yes,
but I can tell you this, when you came up with that stat at Pimlico, that was amazing. And he is a sire for course. If there are horses for courses, he's a sire for course. And Good Magic has done so well so far. It's a very, very popular at Stud. Very, very bright prospect there. And so it would be nice to see him get a classic winner here with Muth.
Let's take a look at the pace scenario that we think. That's our second topic on It's Official this week. How will these 9 runners shake out in order to determine the pace? Let's go back to the field and talk about how the post position draw may have impacted things, Jeff. The inside 3 really have no speed at all. I mean, you're looking at Mogatu, Uncle Heavy, Catching Freedom, maybe the 3 big closers in the entire field. So Muth is easily going to clear those if he breaks well, and he typically does. With Imagination, the other Baffert horse, to the far outside in the gate, how do you see the post position having an impact on how this pace may shake out?
Well, you look at Muth, number 4, and the 3 horses drawn towards the inside have no speed. At least theoretically, they have no speed. You never know for sure, but I don't think they'll be in the first flight, which means Muth can get over to the rail and sit there and probably make the lead if Imagination, the Baffert stablemate, doesn't go out and hook him early, which I don't think they'll do. So looking at your chart here, it's easy to see Muth in front, who is a very quick horse when they allow him to show his early speed.
Right.
Don't forget when he won his maiden at 5/8 of a mile in June of his 2-year-old season, he was 3 lengths in front in the opening quarter, ran 21.344.2 as a 2-year-old in June. So he's quick. Now they've been switching him off and teaching him to relax, and he's done that very well. But in this particular case, because he's drawn inside of Imagination, I think Muth will go, and I think Imagination will just kind of, bird dog him from the outside, not get too close, but close enough to keep him within range. And this is one of the reasons why I think it could be a parade, because Seize the Gray and Just Steel, who you logically have as pressers, they're really not that fast. I mean, I don't know, Jeremy. I mean, could this be a 1-2 merry-go-round type race?
I wouldn't be shocked if it is. I mean, Muth has got the opportunity to go this time. In the Arkansas Derby, he broke very alert and then was kind and came right back to Juan Hernandez. And of course, you had the favorite in that race, Timberlake, was even money in that spot and had a lot of speed. He was just patient, sat and went and got him. But he had that urge coming out of the gate. But the good thing is he came off the bridle, and relaxed for Hernandez. I don't think with essentially a rail draw in post 4 here because of the 3 horses inside of him without any early speed. I mean, I don't think that they will take back in this particular case. Now, Imagination is the question mark. And like you said, the 2 Baffert trainees are probably more likely to kind of thumb wrestle going around the turn than they are to arm wrestle, right? I mean, they're not going to get after each other in this particular spot. If you go back to the San Felipe, when Imagination won that race, and that kind of really put him on the Triple Crown trail as a serious 2-turn contender. This is an interesting race. I want to go back to the start of this and show everybody, because there are 2 Baffert horses in this 4-horse field. And it's kind of like this race because there's not a lot of numbers in the front end of the field to talk about. So, we got 9 horses in the field, but 3 of them are really drop back closers in this field. It's kind of like a small field, cat and mouse up front. Baffert had Wind Me Up in post 2, and the outside post draw in this race was Imagination. And as we roll the tape here and let you take the look at the first part of this race, you're going to see Imagination on the outside. Once the inside horse Wind Me Up goes and is being asked by his rider, Imagination they're casual, Jeff. They're not going to go up and engage, and they're going to take that first over trip. And so this looks a lot like what we could see in the Preakness Stakes, with the more inner drawn horse Muth going to the front, and then Imagination trying to sit just off of him to the outside.
It makes perfect sense for Bob to employ similar tactics, because you've got Imagination on the outside who is not ranked or anything. He's going to get the same pace stalking trip theoretically in the Preakness as he got here in this race. And this was a race he won. So, I mean, to me, I think Imagination, if he sits second, 2 things will happen. Number 1, he won't go head and kill his stablemate off or try to. And second of all, if he's not asked to do much outside, and that's why I like the outside draw for him, he can move when he wants to move. He can go and engage Muth at the top of the stretch. If he goes by, great, fine. But if he doesn't or can't, then he's still fresh enough to be able to at least save second money. There's nothing wrong with that either. So I think from the outside post, Imagination is just an absolute slam dunk to sit second and try to win the race if Muth can't get the trip. But if not, have enough left in the tank to at least run second. So I think there's a very good possibility that, number 1, we have a moderate pace, and number 2 is Baffert's 1-2 all the way to the top of the stretch, and then from there on in, and may the best horse win.
Right, who can get the distance of the mile and 3/16 at that point? What about Mystic Dan in terms of the pace? This is a horse who showed speed early in his career, but they've had a lot of success coming off the pace in the last 3 starts. Is this a time to try to change tactics and get him back up into the race more? That inside rail rally has kind of been his calling card. When he was outside of horses, he didn't do as well in some of his other starts. So with Muth to his inside, I mean, are you going to try to like sit and rally up the rail again with him? Or are you going to try to get up and engage? I don't think he's going to clear Muth at any point. So, in the early part of the race and get in front of him. So he's going to be outside of him. Does Brian Hernandez want to stay inside or does he want to stay in touch? What's more important to him?
I don't think you can change his style. I watched the Derby, and although Mystic Dan was always within range from the 4.5 to the 5/8 pole of the wire, the first part of that race, he was pretty well back. I don't think you can send him out of there and use him early. I don't think that'll work. I think his natural abilities will carry him to be in the second flight or a third flight, but then gradually move up and from the 5/16 pole of the wire, try to do what you did last time. I think that why it didn't. It's not broke. Why try to fix it, right? I don't think you can change his style, and you just have to hope that the race shape and the trip fall into his lap like it did last time. And if that happens, then Mystic Dan's got a chance to repeat. But I wouldn't use him early because I don't think he wants to be used early.
And if there's any confusion about which Baffert horse might go to the front, again, we're trying to, dope out the pace scenario here between Muth and Imagination. When Bob has the best horse in a race, he'll typically just go with it, right? He'll just send his horse to the front. We saw that with American Pharaoh and Justify. Once they got past the first leg of the Triple Crown, it would just go, right? And when they got to the Belmont, just go and get out there. You go back to Point Given. I remember I always thought Point Given, was this big tank and didn't have a lot of natural speed and finished so well in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and kind of had that rallying style. When they knew they were the best horse in the Santa Anita Derby, they just went right after Crafty CT, who was exceptionally fast. And that was like a breakout performance where you went, wow, Point Given is like something otherworldly. They also did that, of course, in the Belmont Stakes when they were going up against Baltimore Star, who was tremendous speed in there. Well, how'd that work out for anybody, right? I mean, Point Given just ran everybody in the ground and won by like 11, 12 lengths or whatever it was in the Belmont Stakes that day. It seems to me that the approach will be with Juan Hernandez aboard for Muth. We think we're the best horse in the race. Just go take it. Whether or not that works or not, we'll find out. And if you want to argue against 8-5 or less or whatever in your handicapping, that's perfectly fine. But we're trying to figure out how the race shape is going to take place in here. And I will be surprised if Muth is not in control of the pace of this race.
No, he will be. I mean, best laid plans. If one doesn't break or whatever, then you change. But if Muth breaks running, and let me tell you, he's a terrific gate horse. I mean, he puts himself in the race. Doesn't have to worry about dirt in his face. He just goes, gets the position, and a lovely draw. And in Imagination's case, I mean, if I owned Imagination, I'd say sit second. Yeah. Maybe we wear him down late. It's possible. Maybe this is real quiet Indian Charlie again. Who knows? Yeah. But if not, I'd like to run second. And that's the best way to do it.
If you like Imagination, this is the time to go, right? I mean, this is a horse who's been 5-2, 1-5, 2-5, 2-1, 4-5, and even money throughout his career. I mean, this is by far the juiciest price you're going to get on him. And how about Frankie Dettori? I think he's got 23 or 24 classic victories in Europe. He's looking for his first American classic at the twilight of his career. What a story that would be. I know a lot of people are not rooting for these connections who won last year, of course, with National Treasure and Baffert and everything that goes with that. But I don't think there would be anybody upset with Frankie Dettori winning an American Classic race, right? I mean, I think that's the one smile that everybody can kind of agree upon here. We're happy to see Frankie Dettori racing here in America at the end of his career. If he won a big race like this, you might be kicking the dirt a little bit. You might be throwing away a ticket, but when he does that flying dismount in the infield in front of the cupola, that's going to be a shot that we're all going to remember. Yeah, so
that would be fun.
There would be no disappointment if Frankie Dettori were able to guide this one to victory. Okay, let's talk about the horses from a gambling standpoint that we feel are the must-uses in this race. And when you're talking about exotic wagers in this field of 9, of course, there'll be exacta, try, superfecta wagering in here. For the must-uses, we've got an exactathon you want to take part in. $50,000 in additional money is on the line at First Bet and Express Bet over Friday and Saturday. $25,000 exactathon each day. $25,000 up for grabs on Friday. Same $25,000 up for grabs on Saturday. If you hit exactas in 6 or more races on this 14 race card, so it's not even half the card. It's not easy to hit 6 exactas, $2 minimums here. But if you do, you're going to split $20,000 with only other players on the platforms who had 6 or more exacta wins. Anybody who hits the most exactas will split $5,000 overall over the course of the 14 races each and every day. So bet the exactas, play the exactathon. Be sure to do so with Express Bet and First Bet. And Jeff and I are going to try to help you out here with the horses that we think are the must-uses in this category. Obviously, Jeff, let's start off the top. We both agree Muth is going to be in our exotic plays for sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, because of the small field and because there's 3 or 4 in here that I don't even think will have any impact whatsoever, you have to take a stand. I mean, at least I have to. I have to be right or wrong. I'm not afraid to be right or wrong. So I'm going to put Muth on top. I'm going to assume that he's going to win. Now, if he doesn't win, I lose, but I can live with that because I'm wrong, you know. But another question is, if you want to try to take the 8-5 or less and try to get a little bit more value than just a straight play like there, you almost have to figure out who's going to run second. And I mentioned Imagination. I think he's got a very good chance of running second, but I don't think he has to run second because he might do the stupid thing and try to go out and win the race, which would then probably cost him second money. So here you see him breeze on the outside. You see how easily Muth is going on the inside, and really Imagination is going very well on the outside as well. And at this stage, it almost looks like he's going the easier of the two. But then Muth can kind of play with you. He kind of toys with his competition. You can see the jock standing up on him. The ears are up. He's just cruising. What about? By the way, this is what you have to pay $2 million for if you buy a horse like this in the 2-year-old training sale. What a beautiful mover. What a rhythmic, just an absolute flawless action on the inside. And now Imagination's got to get niggled at just a little bit going into the first turn to stay even. He's coming off the bridle just a bit, whereas Muth is still under a hammerlock. And this is a good work for both. But, man, I mean, you talk about a peg of dynamite. Look at how Muth is going. I mean, he's just never taking a deep breath. It's hard for me to imagine him losing based on this work. And it's not like he doesn't have the form to go with it either. So I'm going to try to be right on the top with Muth and then try to figure out whether Imagination can hang on for second. And if not, then who might be the one that picks up the pieces? Now, Jeremy, you have always been a little bit more bullish than Tuscan Gold than me. So give me the sales pitch.
Well, I loved him in his debut race at 2. He got in all kinds of trouble in a race against Sierra Leone, his stablemate for Chad Brown. He was best that day, and he ended up running 4th with a ton of trouble. And I couldn't wait to see him get back to the races. And when he made his second career start at Gulfstream Park earlier this year, January 31st, he did it just like I was hoping he would. Skipped the lines on the lead in this particular spot. That's a Todd Pletcher trainee who's a brother to Arrogate. This is a very well-bred, well-meant horse. And Tuscan Gold in this 1 1/8 race coming off the layoff just gets to his outside and goes right on by him here, and he's going to finish up nicely. He came back and ran 3rd in the Louisiana Derby out of that start with a wide trip. I was a little bit disappointed with the Louisiana Derby, but what I liked about it was coming out of that race, Chad had his horses lined up, right? He had Sierra Leone for the Kentucky Derby. He immediately said pretty much right after the Louisiana Derby that this is my Preakness horse. So Tuscan Gold with just 3 career starts, he comes into the Preakness intended for this spot, just like we had talked about with the Baffert horses, of course. You know, they knew they weren't going Kentucky Derby, so they had this date marked for a while. He's coming up to the race. I think Tuscan Gold's one of those horses that I'm going to use as a must-use underneath, and I might even get a little saucy and get some top-end action on him as well, because I think he's got a chance to upset this race. If the flow of the race doesn't go Muth's way, as we anticipate it probably will, if it doesn't, I like Tuscan Gold as the first man up, as you say, to maybe pull the upset in this particular spot. I think he'll be finishing well. You know, we go back to that pace scenario. He'll probably be in the 3rd flight with Mystic Dan behind the Lucas horses who are pressing and behind, obviously, the 2 Bafferts in the front. But they're going to get first run on the horses from the back of the pack, Jeff. What about Catching Freedom as we talk about our must-uses in here? Catching Freedom got into Baltimore last night at 2 a.m. He came out to the track this morning. Here's some live video video from him this morning, not live, but this was live when they shot it. This is today's video, I'm trying to tell you, from this morning, as he just basically woke up from a nap and they took him out the train in the morning, again, arriving at 2 a.m. We get to see him. He just ponies a mile here, Jeff. He doesn't do anything more, doesn't get away from the pony and jog or gallop today. But Catching Freedom has trained well enough that Brad Cox is going to wheel him back on 2 weeks rest and come back from his 4th place finish in the Kentucky Derby. He's the X factor to me in this race that I really don't have a great feel on how he's going to run. He ran good, not great in the Kentucky Derby, but you can't really argue with a 4th place finish in the field of 20. I just thought he had every chance Mystic Dan did, and he didn't accelerate quite as well as Mystic Dan did. But he's won at 1 mile and 3/16. He won the Louisiana Derby over that trip. What do you make of Catching Freedom? What are you seeing here from a horse who had a hard race in the Derby?
I wasn't that crazy about him going into the Derby. He actually ran a little bit better than I thought he would, because I wasn't really that high on the Louisiana Derby itself, which is why I wasn't all that high on Tuscan Gold. Although you look at his form, the Beyer numbers, he's gone from 65 to 84 to 95, all of that in just a 3-race career. So he's made a lot of improvement, a lot of advancement in a short period of time. And who's to say, with the time off now since late March, that he won't produce another forward move? So if I had to choose between the two, even though Catching Freedom beat Tuscan Gold in the Louisiana Derby, I probably would go with Tuscan Gold. I don't like the quick turnaround for Catching Freedom. I think Tuscan Gold's got a little bit more tactical speed. I think he'll be in the second flight where he needs to be. I didn't think his Louisiana Derby race, although he did finish 3rd, was maybe quite as good as the line would show, only because while he did lose ground, he was in the clear, never had a straw on his path, moved when he wanted to move, had dead aim. It was still a good race, don't get me wrong, especially for a horse that only ran twice. So there's upside there. And the Medalla d'Oro out of a Cumberland mare, that's nothing but getting better with racing and age and maturity and experience. So he's much, much more likely to have room for improvement than some of the others. I would say, based on the price, I would probably put him in the 2-hole behind Booth. Again, if I'm wrong about Booth and he gets beat, then I'm wrong. I accept it. I lose and go on to the next race. But I definitely think Tuscan Gold can run second. Let's put it that way. And if that's the case, then maybe, Booth over Tuscan Gold at 8-1 on the morning line makes it worthwhile.
Let's talk Mystic Dan amongst the must-uses. Do we feel that you must use the Kentucky Derby winner in this particular spot? Of course, he was a dominant winner of the Southwest. We'll talk about that in a bit, if weather has anything to do with things on Saturday. But on a fast track, is Mystic Dan a must-use for you?
No, because first choice over second choice, do I need that? I mean, if I don't use Mystic Dan and Muth beats him and Mystic Dan runs second, am I going to, fret about it for the rest of my life? I don't think so. And I don't know if Mystic Dan's going to come back in 2 weeks after laying his body down in the Derby and winning all out life and death. He does not have a history. In fact, never has won 2 in a row. So maybe he won't go backwards a little bit. Now, again, I would be kind of foolish to completely throw him out if it does have a rain on Saturday and we catch an off track that we know that he's supposed to like. But in terms of a gambling situation, I don't need a Muth over Mystic Dan exact. I just don't need it. And if it comes that way, I'll get over it.
This is Mystic Dan this morning at Pimlico. He's been in town for a couple days now. Didn't do a whole lot on a wet track. He did a little bit more today on the dry track in his second day locally too, which is typical. Horses don't do a lot their first day off the van at a new venue. But, he's given good signs. The ears are up, Jeff. He looks like a happy horse. And, it's not going to – the 1.25 miles that he ran last time is not going to show now. I mean, if he was dragging and it was showing now, he wouldn't be here. It's going to show after 1 mile of the Preakness, right? And does he have anything left the final 3/16 or so of the Preakness stakes? But the signs he's giving now, just like he's given Kenny McPeek since the Kentucky Derby, say you move on with him. And I think he'll run a good race. Even like last year where Mage ran 3rd in this race, he was certainly no more surprising of a Kentucky Derby winner than Mage. Now, you could say this year's field in the Preakness Stakes looks stronger than what we saw last year. Muth stronger than Blazing Sevens, Tuscan Gold every bit as good or Tuscan Gold every bit as good as Blazing Sevens for Chad Brown, and National Treasure I don't think stacked up last year at this time with what we think Muth is. So I think this year's field's a little bit tougher than what we saw last year with Mage coming out of the Kentucky Derby, but I won't be shocked if Mystic Dan hits the board. I won't be stunned if he wins and we go to the Belmont, but I'm against it happening. I just don't. At a shorter price, obviously. I mean, you had to take, you're going from a $30, $40 type mutual horse to $7 horse here in the Preakness Stakes. That's, price is all part of it. And if he's going to run back to some of those other bounces that he's had, then he may not hit the board in this particular spot. Because if you look, the 2 races in his career where he got beat the largest margins, 8 lengths in an allowance race at Churchill in November and 6.25 lengths in the Arkansas Derby, both came off of his big, tremendous victories prior to that. So his biggest efforts have come with his worst efforts following them up. We talked about this with Fierceness, and I was too dumb to listen to the talk that Fierceness was going to bounce coming off of the Florida Derby into the Kentucky Derby. I don't know if he bounced and we could relitigate the pick of Fierceness for months, but I'm not confident in Mystic Dan. So when you say must use, I don't put him in the must uses. I don't think you must use Mystic Dan in this year's Preakness.
No, not at the price. So you also got a great trip in the Derby. That's no guarantee he's going to get a similar trip. And yeah, I went back and watched the Arkansas Derby to try to find a reason why he didn't run better that day as opposed to his next race. And he was a little farther back, maybe they wanted him to be, but other than that, he just kind of ran around the track. I don't know. So, whereas Tuscan Gold, I think both of us believe that we have not seen the best of Tuscan Gold. Mm-hmm. And if he steps forward, then he's got a good chance to complete the exacta. And again, if you're going to key the favorite on top, you don't want to go too deep because then all of a sudden you're diluting your successful payoff if you happen to win it. You just can't be afraid to take a stand. So for me, it's Muth over Imagination and Tuscan Gold, and that might even be a good try for me as well. And that's the way I look at it. If Mystic Dan, gets in there somewhere, so be it.
We talked about it. Like, we'll be happy if Frankie Dettori wins, and we'll be happy if Mystic Dan wins, and we go to Belmont with a potential Triple Crown, Belmont at Saratoga this year. And for all involved, that will be a great result for this year's Preakness. May not be great for our bottom lines and our finances and our account balances, but in grand terms of the racing industry, it's always better when there's a Triple Crown on the line at the end of the series. Yeah. Now, let's talk about the one thing we don't want to talk about on these shows, but it's a topic and we know that it comes up. The weather does not look great for this weekend in Baltimore. There's a 60% chance of rain on Saturday, high temperature of 68 degrees. It's going to rain Tuesday and Wednesday this week, Tuesday evening into Wednesday, according to the weather forecast. So if we come up with an off-track Jeff Siegel, how does that change things up for the Preakness? We talked about on a fast track, Mystic Dan is not a must-use, but if it's wet, you get those exaggerator kind of feelings with him, right? The winner of the Preakness back in 2016 when he turned the tables on Nyquist. You could certainly see Mystic Dan on a wet track relishing the going if that's what we get on Saturday.
Well, he has one race on an off track, and it was a freaky performance. He earned a triple-digit career top 101 Beyer number when Mystic Dan won the Southwest, and he did all of his best work in the final furlong. He just skimmed over it like a mud freak. And I was a little bit hesitant to expect that he would come back and do that again on fast ground, which he did not do in the Arkansas Derby, but then he did it in the Kentucky Derby on fast ground. So he may just be a decent sort of colt, but I mean, when you run that well in the Southwest and put 6 lengths in front of everybody else, then you have to conclude that you like it off track. And I think based on that, my evaluation of Mystic Dan's chances go up considerably if in fact it's really wet. Now, if it's just drying out close to fast, probably not. But if it's really sloppy or muddy, Mystic Dan is going to take some beating for sure. Now, Muth has never been on an off track, but he's by Good Magic, a son of Curlin, and out of Mare by Uncle Mo. There shouldn't be any issue whatsoever with him handling off track, especially when you consider how good of a fluid a mover that he is. He just floats over the ground, so I can't imagine him not handling it. The others there are a few others in here that have good off-track form, but not against this level of competition. So,
right.
I really think that if it does come up wet, the only thing that would change for me would be to try to have to, regardless of whether I want to or not, elevate Mystic Dan's chances.
Right. I agree. And when we look at those past performance lines of the other horses, I don't think anybody else moves up tremendously on the off track except Mystic Dan. And so, yeah. And look, the thing I always tell people when you're handicapping for a wet track, whether it's Keeneland, whether it's, the Preakness or any track that you're playing, is the three things I think you want on an off track are past experience. You want a horse with some early speed, and then you want to look at the pedigree last of all. And really, a lot of these horses are so closely bred anymore, and there's so many mud influences that pedigree angle rarely makes really much of an impact anymore. So it's about past performance over this racetrack, pro or con. That's the number one thing. If a horse is run poorly or subpar on an off track, that's just as important to get rid of that runner as it is to move somebody else up. And I always just like speed on a wet track. I mean, it's just you stay out of the slop, the kickback. You take a lot of the variables out of there, and horses just seem to skip over it and go on a really sloppy going. If you get a deep, heavy, tiring out racetrack, then the closers have their chance with stamina becoming the main player. But on a sloppy type racetrack, you want that speed out there, and I would think that would accentuate the two Baffords and then Mystic Dan, and now you've got a real chalk fest going for Preakness 149 on a wet track. This looks like it's an $8.60 exacta. So we don't want the rain for business purposes. We don't want it for quality of competition purposes, and we don't want it for gambling reasons either. This is not a case, I think, where you're doing a rain dance, unless you just want to bet Mystic Dan on the nose. But his price will go down. Everybody knows the same thing, right? I remember when Frisian Fire got bet to favoritism in the Kentucky Derby because it rained, and everybody said, "Oh my God, Frisian Fire is the mud freak in the field." And he's probably like the weakest Kentucky Derby favorite of all time based on his resume, but he actually went favored in the Kentucky Derby and ended up running 18th in that race. So, but if Mystic Dan could be favored if it is a sloppy track, there will be enough people talking that sentiment that could close the 2 or 3 point difference between the two favorites. So even if you love Mystic Dan and you want to bet on him, I don't know that you're praying for the wet track because it's going to kill your price.
Exactly. I mean, everybody reads the same form, right?
Right.
No secret.
No.
But I always like to have a fast track anyway, just because you have a much better chance of trusting the form than you would if an off track happens. And that's what happened with Mystic Dan with me. I didn't know what to make of his Southwest win, other than he ran great.
Yeah.
But how much of it was an off track? Well, it turns out probably not as much as I thought, because he did win the Derby. I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. But who knows if he'll do that again? Anyway, let's just hope it's dry, or at least reasonably fast, and at least reasonably dry anyway, and then we can have a true running of the race.
We've got it in the queue, so let's give the fans a chance to see it and hear it if you're on our audio channels. Here is that Southwest Stakes where Mystic Dan loved it in the mud.
On the inside, Mystic Dan attempts to get closer, slips inside of Windstock. Linebacker is next, trying to pass runners on the outside. He's 4 lengths behind, making a move as Windstock plummets back in the wrong direction. He's done. Liberal Arts trying to move forward inside of the weakening Windstock. He's about 6 lengths off the pace as the leaders start to line up, coming back to the lead. Jess Steele making a big move after Carbone, and Otto the Conqueror. Jess Steele storms to the front. Jess Steele and Ramon Vasquez have 3/16 to go. Here comes Mystic Dan right up the rail, though, with a rail skimming ride by Brian Hernandez Jr. And Mystic Dan is turning it on in a huge effort for the Kenny McPeak barn. Mystic Dan 5-6 ahead, and he wins wrapped up, a dominant win in the Southwest.
When he does it, man, he does it big. He doesn't mess around. And of course, that dramatic cliffhanger in the Kentucky Derby where he spurted clear at the top of the stretch in a very similar move. But that mile and a 16th of the Southwest Stakes was a little different than the mile and a quarter of the Kentucky Derby, and the quality of competition coming from the back drew things very tight at the wire. There is still some question. You look, he's the son of Golden Sense. You look at the pedigree. You look at his running style. I know he just won at a mile and a quarter, but under different circumstances, you could make the case that Mystic Dan is going to be, struggling at the finish here and hoping to hold on again at a mile and 3/16. That could be the scenario. I mean, there's no guarantee that he's a classic. He's not like a Vino Rosso, a horse that you just know is going a mile and a quarter, mile and a half, and just as far as they want him to go. He's going to be circumstantial on whether or not he gets distance on some of his races at this upper level. But hey, proof's in the pudding, right? Kentucky Derby winner. They're never taking that away from him and shortening back to a mile and 3/16. The distance is not the thing you're worried about necessarily with Mystic Dan. It's in the back of your mind, maybe whether he's a classic distance horse or not still, but his big deal is, can he replicate the effort?
Well, he'll go a mile and 3/16 if it rains. I'm pretty sure about that. So
that's right.
we'll look at him. I'll tell you one thing about that tape, though, that I had forgotten. He was right on top of the leaders at the quarter pole. It wasn't like he came way out of it. He's got maybe a little bit more tactical speed than I'm giving him credit for, which would put him in a great spot. That's the good news. The bad news is that horse breezing up front, Muth, if in fact he gets that kind of trip, he's not coming back, I'm afraid.
Yeah, because what we saw in that same series was Just Steel turning into the stretch and Muth running past him and drawing off, similarly to what Mystic Dan did in the Southwest Stakes. So a little head-to-head comparison with those particular runners. Let's go to our fifth and final topic. We go from the weather. Finally, it's a pick, and we've got to figure out who our top pick is for the 149th Preakness Stakes. A reminder, if you're watching here in the Wager Guide on Tuesday, Jeff and I will have our final $100 wagering strategies and how to bet this race in the Wager Guide coming up on Wednesday. Eddie Olczyk will come in with his picks and $100 wagering strategies on Thursday. Also on Thursday, you'll get the first bet artificial intelligence picks for all 28 races over 2 days, the Friday full card and the Saturday full card. If you want some Black-Eyed Susan analysis, you can check out the Wager Guide right now, where Millie Ball already has her analysis in for the big Philly race on Friday. All right, Jeff Siegel, we stalled enough here. Is it start with M and end with Uth? Is this who you're going with?
Yeah, I think that's the way I'm going to go with. I don't know whether 8-5 or less will offer value, but I do think that Muth, first of all, you look at Muth's form, and it's pretty darn good to begin with. He's 6 starts, 4 wins, 2 seconds. That's pretty impressive. But there's a very real possibility, based on his last race, his win in the Arkansas Derby, which earned a career top 98 by our number, and the works that we have seen since then. I mean, Imagination's a pretty good horse, beating a photo in the San Diego Derby. And Muth has been breezing to him. I mean, there's a very good possibility that as a grandson of Curlin, Muth is just starting to get good. And he was very precocious last year as a 2-year-old. He made his first start in June of his 2-year-old season, which is very early for Bob Baffert. He rarely runs his 2-year-olds before Del Mar, which doesn't start until late July. So for Muth to come around that quickly and to run in that race tells me he was precocious, but maybe not the physical specimen that he is now. He could be 2 to 3, 4 lengths better now than he was even in his last race. And the way he's been breezing, it wouldn't shock me if he is. So I said earlier that I didn't think he was a great horse. Well, he's not yet, but he might be approaching that. And I think this is going to be a pivotal race for him, because this will tell us where he might be in the summer, late summer, and in the fall among the best in the division.
It's easy to compare him to National Treasure from last year because they're coming off similar, missing the Derby because of the suspension, showing up here Preakness-wise. And at this time last year, we didn't have great feelings about National Treasure, but he went on to take Cody's Wish to a whisker in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Horse of the Year, Cody's Wish, ran him to an absolute whisker out at Santa Anita in a epic race, and then came back and won the Pegasus World Cup this year. So, like you said, we don't know how good Muth might be, and you say he's not a great horse now, but he might end up becoming one. National Treasure is kind of a sign that these horses still have a lot of improvement that they can make between now and then. And, we've got this new Grand 3, the first Grand 3 series with the big bonus money involved. If a horse can win the Preakness and then come back to California and win the new California Crown in September and then win the Pegasus World Cup, it's kind of modeled a little bit about what we saw last year with the campaign of National Treasure. But if a horse can do that again, it's going to be worth a ton of money to do so in the new bonus series. So, interesting times for Preakness and beyond. And if you have a horse who's improving right now, think of a Tuscan Gold and horses like that who only have 3 career starts. If this Preakness is their coming out party, maybe they're not Triple Crown winners because they missed the first leg of the Triple Crown. But there is a lot of money ahead for these horses and a lot of prestigious races to go with it. Jeff's top pick in this year's Preakness is going to be Muth. If he happens to finish second or third, Jeff's going to get his money back up to $10 because when he bets with First Bet and Express Bet, our $10 money back special will be on select stakes races on Black-Eyed Susan Day Friday and Pimlico and Preakness Day Saturday at Pimlico. So check out the list with the promotions page at expressbet.com and on the First Bet app. First Bet app, go to the bottom right and click down at the bottom right, and you get a list of all the promotions there on the app and find out which races are involved in the money back special on Friday and Saturday. Again, if your win bet finishes second or third, you can get up to $10 back. And with that little safety net, that's where I might be leaning here with the way I'm going to go in the Preakness Stakes. Look, Muth is the most likely winner of this race, and I totally agree with Jeff. I think he's the horse to beat, and he's going to get the run of the race, I think, the way the pace goes. Usually when the best horse in the race gets the pace set up, they don't give up back that advantage. You guys have heard me say that 10 times in podcasts over the last year. Best horse gets the right setup, they don't give back the advantage. That makes Muth the most likely winner, and I think he's going to win the race. But I'm looking at the betting the Preakness Stakes different than I do the Kentucky Derby. Jeff, we talked on Derby betting, the Superfecta, 116,000 combinations, right, in the Superfecta in a 20-horse field. With this 9-horse field, we're down to 3,000 combinations, from 116,000 to 3,000. This isn't a Superfecta race. It's not a trifecta race. In the Derby, you had 6,800 different ways the tri could come in. Here, you've got 504. So we're not looking at tries. We're not looking at supers. You've got to focus in a field like this, I think, to get your best value in exactas and straight bets. We talked about the exacta play, Muth over Tuscan Gold. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's worth the shot to go to the horse that you think is the best horse at the best price. And I think that might be Tuscan Gold in this race. I think we're going to get every bit of 6, 7, 8 to 1. I don't see him going any lower than that in the wagering. So if I can get that kind of price, Chad Brown trying to win the Preakness for the third time in since 2017. He had a second place finish last year with Blazing Sevens in a tough beat. Horse who's been guided to this race. Give me that money back special if I finish second or third and Tuscan Gold gets there. But I'm going to probably have a lot of exactas, Muth over Tuscan Gold, and I'm going to get some money, win money for sure on Tuscan Gold. I think those are the two most likely winners of this race. Muth by far the most likely winner, in terms of percentage chances, 40, 50% chance to win the race, maybe kind of, about 6 to 5 odds, 40% chance, something like that to win this race. But then I think Tuscan Gold is the best of the others with a chance to upset him and at a right price to do so. So I'll take my shot there. Kind of two different ways of playing the race. An exacta with those two. And then, of course, on the win end, I think Tuscan Gold stands a real chance to win this thing.
Well, I tell you this, I looked at the Express Bet wagering guide for the Preakness, and we had our consensus of picks from all the Express Bet members. And if they're right, then Muth is going to be like 3 to 5.
Right.
Everybody picked him, and deservedly so. So you might get your 6, 8, 9, 10 to 1 on Tuscan Gold, and why not try him at that price? And if he can run second, you'll make money. I promise you. So
yeah, it'd be a decent enough exacta, right? I mean, $35, $36 kind of exacta, something like that behind the favorite wouldn't be so bad. I wouldn't see for $2 in that particular spot. Again, you're attacking the Preakness different than you are the Kentucky Derby. The Kentucky Derby is a once a year betting opportunity because of the math, the number of horses in the race, the field size is everything, right? And the pool size is so huge, but the pool size in the Preakness is bigger than almost any other race you're going to bet this year too. You just don't have the field size to work out the combinations, right? Losing tickets, pay the winning tickets. Got to remind people that's the way it works in pari-mutuel. If you're new to horse racing, and we're glad you're joining our podcast, but the losing tickets pay the winning tickets. And when there's 9 in the field versus 20, there's just going to be a lot less losing combinations to pay the winners. And that's how you get the bigger payoffs on Derby Day than you would, say, in the Preakness Stakes. We're not looking for a big bomber in the Preakness. There's only been a couple horses in history win this race at 20 to 1 or more. And again, as we mentioned, in the last 3 years, there's only been one horse on the tote board total who was over 20 to 1 odds. So you're looking for intermediate strikes when you're betting the
Sure.
Preakness. A nice $36 exacta, a nice $14 winner, $18 winner. If you could pull something like that out, daily double, multi-race bets, pick threes, pick fours, going to the horse that you like in the Preakness, that's the way you want to attack it from a gambling standpoint coming into this Saturday.
Well, I hope it's going to be a great race. It'll set up the things nicely. Whoever wins it for the Belmont Stakes at Saratoga 3 weeks down the road. But I would like to see Muth win, or I'd like to see anybody win. Specifically, if not Muth, then certainly Mystic Dan, as you pointed out, that would make for a terrific Belmont and give racing some excellent coverage there. And I think Mystic Dan, not without a chance for sure. But still, a great card. Can't wait to dive in and start handicapping. The PPs are out for Saturday. I will start hitting that today. And it's always fun when you have big days like this with great undercards and a classic race to enjoy. I would like to see the weather cooperate, but regardless, looking forward to Saturday at Pimlico.
Yeah, historic Pimlico, its days are dwindling until it's going to be demolished and rebuilt and a new sparkling Pimlico. But the old Grand Dam's going to have the nation's attention on it again this Saturday for the 149th running of the Preakness Stakes. Jeff and I will be back on Thursday this week for our first call podcast. Typically, we do that every Friday for weekend stakes races. So if you want to follow us throughout the course of the racing year, that's on Fridays, our first call podcast where we handicap weekend stakes races. But since Black Eyed Susan Day is such a big day on Friday, we want to get a head start on Thursday, handicap some of those Friday races for you, and then give you an early look at early bird wagering for the Preakness Stakes, of course, will be open on Friday as well. Some of the races that we will look at on our Friday podcast include the Pimlico Special, just a tradition-rich race that goes back to the 1930s, Seabiscuit and all, Pimlico Special back to the 1800s, the opening of Pimlico Racecourse itself. We've got horses in there like King's Barnes, winner of the Louisiana Derby a couple years ago. Red Route One's made more than $1 million. Jeff and I will give you our picks for this race coming up on Friday. We'll also handicap the Black Eyed Susan Stakes for you. That's the Phillies version of the and that's not the right field for the Black Eyed Susan. I don't know where those horses came from, but Timberlake is not in the Black Eyed Susan. We're going to get that out of there. And the Dinner Party Stakes we will handicap. That race is these 12 turf horses. $500,000 Dinner Party Stakes is the race before the Preakness Stakes. So, Jeff, we went 51 minutes without any major mistakes, and then I threw up a graphic. I'm not sure where it came from, but we'll get that fixed up for you. Black Eyed Susan Stakes, though, should be a good one. Be sure to check out Millie Ball's analysis of that race. You know, the filly for Peter Urton coming in from Southern California in your backyard may vie for favoritism in there, coming off a third-place finish in the Santa Anita Oaks. And then, of course, we've got Lemon Muffin for D. Wade Lucas coming out of the Kentucky Oaks. She won the Honeybee Stakes this year down at Oaklawn Park. So that's a look at some of the races. Jeff and I will give you a fine-tuned handicapping analysis of those races and more coming up on our Thursday show. So, Jeff, we got a lot of work to do, man. 28 races. Tell the fans where they can find your work over the next few days.
Oh, always at Express Bet. We'll have Santa Anita for those who want to play on the West Coast. We'll have best plays, prime plays for you, and certainly our analysis of the Derby and the Black Eyed Susan. So it's all at expressbet.com, free as always for members of ExpressBet.
All right. So on behalf of everybody with First and to our family that's traveling down there to host the race this week, good luck to everybody. Safe travels. Great luck to the fans out there playing the Preakness Stakes. And on behalf of my partner, Jeff Siegel, I'm Jeremy Plonk. We'll talk to you Thursday. Hi-ho, Pimlico. Enjoy this year's Preakness.